Wrestling Association, also known as Team Georgia USA Wrestling. And I prepared this presentation specifically to outline all of the details that you need to consider when starting a wrestling club. And we'll go from the very beginning all the way to the very end, and hopefully after this presentation, you'll know all the things that you need to do, all the questions you'll need to ask to start your own wrestling club. So let's just jump right in. The first thing I want to ask is there a need for a wrestling club in your area? I know that as a chairman of USA Wrestling and Team Georgia, I get calls all the time of people wanting to know where a wrestling club is in their area. Is there another one other than the one they're currently going to? And oftentimes it's a disgruntled parent, a disgruntled coach that is just is unhappy with the situation at the school or the club or the program that they're in, and they're looking for another program, or they're looking to start their own program. I would, seriously tell you to look at all your options there. See if there's a way to, continue working with the program you've been a part of, and if there are some challenges or issues, can those be worked out? The concern that I would have is if you have an existing wrestling program in an area, and somebody breaks off from that program because they're disgruntled. Now are we going to have two smaller programs and less successful? And also, since most of these programs are centered around a high school, and oftentimes they're hosted at a high school in conjunction with a high school coach, are you not breaking off from that high school coach? And is that going to cause some issue there? Again, are you starting a club for the right reasons? Is there a need? Certainly, if there's no club in your area and you see that need, if there's you've checked with the high school coach and the middle school coach, and there's no issue, there's no programs in that area, then we definitely want to get another program started. That's the way wrestling grows. The more clubs we have, the more wrestlers we have, the more wrestlers have, the more events we have, the more events that we have, the more clubs we have, the more wrestlers we have, and that's the circle of life for this sport. So we want to make sure that as you're looking at starting a program, have you done a little research? Have you went and talked to the local high school and middle school? And if you've got several in your area, go talk to all of them. Also, go talk to the rec program. We do have several areas that have both a wrestling club being run out of the high school and another wrestling club being run out of the local rec department. And that's fine. Actually, that's really good, especially if your school district's requirements are that you have to live in the city limits, or you have to live within a certain proximity to the school to be able to attend there. Oftentimes, the kids that live just outside of those boundaries get left out because they can't attend your program because the club is set up to support that school, and since you're not going to be going to that school, they don't want you attending their club. So having another club as an option is a very good thing, but make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, because it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of effort, take a lot of volunteer hours, and if you're just a disgruntled dad or coach, you may not have the desire to put in those hours to make that club successful. When you're looking at your club, you've got to think about, what are the ages that you're looking at working with. Now, this is going to be mainly focused on elementary school, middle school, and high school. Also, there are such things as clubs at the college level, and I'll just talk briefly about those. Those are usually clubs that are sponsored by the college or university. It's a lot of the students become wrestlers, or they were wrestlers in high school and they continue to wrestle in college. It's a program that the college or university offers as a club or intramural sport. And those are good things. We're not going to talk a lot about that, mainly because my experiences with elementary, middle school, and high school. But I will tell you that those college programs do need a lot of support because they don't traditionally do fundraising the way we are used to it, like running tournaments and having youth wrestlers in a youth club. Although that's a great idea for college programs, is to have a youth club at their college or university and help those kids You get a great college wrestling experience and help the wrestling kids in that area. But most of them don't. Most of them don't have a youth program, and they're looking for funding from donations and help from the state associations. So those college programs definitely, or some of them are just completely funded by the university, but most of them need funds so that those wrestlers can travel and compete outside of just the practice room. So talking specifically about elementary, middle school, and high school, what ages are you looking at having your program for? And, there's pros and cons to every way you set up a wrestling club. If you set up just a middle school club, which, a good number of people do, they say, well, we really don't want the little kids. We only want the kids that are getting ready to go into high school. So we're going to focus on middle school. And that's great. Middle school's great. 6th, 7th, and 8th. Some schools are 5th. Some schools are even 9th. But for the most part, that's middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th, or junior high school, some people call it. The challenge with that I have is in the ecosystem of a wrestling club. One of the biggest things that you need is wrestling partners, families volunteering their time. You need the funds coming in. And when you're focused on just middle school wrestlers or junior high wrestlers, that's a lot harder to do. Mainly because the middle school wrestlers get dropped off by their mom and dad. They're a little bit more independent than the little kids. The mom and dads don't stick around. The mom and dads are less involved, and the funding and the volunteers just are not there. Now, some programs are completely done by the school, and the coach is paid, and that's you don't need the volunteers because you have that. You would think, but I still think you do. I still think you need volunteers not only to help with coaching, but also with the organization and running of the club. But you're not going to have that as much in a middle school program as you are with an elementary school program. Now, having an elementary only program is also tough because a lot of kids start wrestling when they're in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And if you have a kid start with you in 5th grade and you're not offering a program that is for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, then you're going to kind of strand him. He's going to have to go find another program to get involved with before moving on to high school. And I'd also encourage that if you're starting a program and there's already an existing middle school program, to not let that dissuade you from pursuing having middle school wrestlers wrestle with you. There's a number of different ways that can be handled in the community. Some communities have a middle school team that's associated with their school and funded by their school, and then they have a club team that includes middle school wrestlers that are either not participating with the middle school or the middle school wrestlers first participate with their league, and then after their league is over, then they come and participate with their club, and that's kind of familiar. That's kind of it's done often out there. Most of the programs, however, that I've seen have a combined elementary school and elementary school and middle school program, and that gets you both. That gets you a lot of young kids in the room. That gets you a lot of young parents willing to volunteer and help out. That gets you the middle school parents when you can. That gets you the middle school wrestlers, and that gives you pretty much a feeder program that goes from kindergarten all the way up through 8th grade. And I would probably suggest that while you can let kids that are younger than kindergarten age into your program, I probably wouldn't market it heavily like that. I have in the past. I've went out and looked for 4 and 5-year-olds, and that's fine. And I love working with those kids. The challenge is the younger they are, the lower their concentration rate is, and it's just a little bit harder and takes a little bit more hand holding. So if you basically set your program up for kindergarten through 8th grade, you're going to get kids that are going to school, that are participating in groups, and that are used to functioning with a group of kids. So it's a little bit better, but either way is fine. And the next real question is, where are you going to hold practice? If you're working with a high school and the program is hosted through the high school, you're probably going to be hosting your practices in the high school wrestling room after the high school finishes. The high school might practice from say 2:30 or 3 o'clock till 5 or 5:30. So then you can come into the wrestling room at 6 o'clock or at 6:30 and start your practices. That's a pretty good scenario. Same thing with middle school. Some middle school programs, however, start right after school. So if the middle school kids get out at 4 o'clock, 3:30, their practice starts immediately after school. And that's kind of tough for the elementary school kids to get to. So that's why you don't see a lot of elementary school kids participating in middle school, because oftentimes the elementary school kids are getting out at the same time or maybe even later. And by the time they get home and mom and dad grabs them and gets ready to take them to the wrestling practice, the middle school practice is already underway or possibly even over. And then within those schools, you can host a wrestling club at a high school, a middle school, an elementary school, a rec department, a YMCA, a boys and girls club, a church basement, rent your own facility. I mean, there's a number of places that you can hold a program. I would say the vast majority of wrestling clubs are operated out of the high school or out of the middle school. But that's not necessarily how you have to do it. And then sometimes there's not a wrestling room. Sometimes there's just a gym that they use for wrestling, that they use for other things as well. They roll the mats up every night, or that they're actually practicing out in the commons area or out in the cafeteria. That's pretty common as well. And they roll the mats out and they have practice and then they put them back away. The next question, obviously, talking about mats is, are mats available? And is other equipment available as well? You need to have wrestling mats to be able to run a practice, and if the school doesn't have wrestling mats, that's going to make it a little tougher because you're going to have to bring mats in from someplace, and you're not going to be able to do that every day, so you're going to have to find out where you can get mats that you can buy. That's going to be an added expense, and then you got to make sure that the school's okay with you leaving them there. Those are just challenges. If you go in and are working with a school or a facility that already has mats, that's a much better situation. And then one of the other questions specific to mats is, what is your mat management plans to prevent skin infection? I know that wrestling gets a bad rap for ringworm and other contagious skin diseases. That's really unfair, because the number one sport for skin infections is football. And if you think about it, it makes sense. In football, the football player never washes his helmet, never washes his pads, and only takes his jersey and his pants home to run them through the washer. And that's if those kids actually remember to do that. So those kids are out there practicing. Their hands are in the grass and in the dirt, which is where the ringworm and other infectious skin diseases are at. And they then grab onto each other's jerseys, pads, up under the pads, helmet. And then after practice, they take all their stuff off. They take their jersey and their pants home, but they hang their pads in their closet, in their locker. And then the next day they come back and they put those same pads on. So that is one of the biggest challenges with that sport. I know some people do go through the locker room spraying disinfectant and chemicals that will kill those infections, but a lot of them don't. In wrestling, really a good mat management program where you're cleaning the mats every day with a disinfectant, be it a specific mat cleaner or be it a diluted bleach solution. You need to be cleaning the mats all the time. And one of the things that I found was that we had the wrestlerettes, the wrestler volunteers for the high school. They would mop down the mats before the high school practiced, and then the wrestlers would mop down the mats after the youth practice. And we still got some skin infections, and we didn't quite understand why we're mopping down the mats. But if you think about it, the high schoolers come in and wrestle and sweat and use the mats, and then 30 minutes, an hour later, the little kids come in and they're actually wrestling on the same mats that the high school wrestled on. So I would strongly encourage you to have a program where somebody comes in early and mops down the mats between the high school practice and your club practice, and that will help keep down the skin infections. As well as you need to have a program of talking to your wrestlers and your parents often about going home and showering and actually using soap, washing your hair, washing from head to toe, and how important it is, and also having them use a disinfectant or a chemical soap. The one that I recommend that's easy and cheap to do is just to take a a medicated dandruff shampoo like Head and Shoulders or Selsun Blue, and not only wash your hair with that, but also use that as body wash and clean your entire body with that. And I believe that cuts down significantly on the number of skin infections that I've seen, as well as there's at the beauty supply place you can get shampoo that's got tea tree, TEATREE, tea tree oil in it. And tea tree oil, it smells medicated, just like the shampoo, the Head and Shoulders, and the Selsun Blue. It tingles when you use it, and it works really, really well in cutting the number of skin infections that you get. To be honest with you, the people that I know that use that religiously, my kids do, other wrestling parents do, and we just don't get skin infections. Now, another thing that we do to help prevent skin infections is we send our kids to practice wearing long sleeves and sweats as much as we can. That just cuts down on the amount of skin that comes in contact with the mats, and that does also help reduce the number of skin infections. So, last thing you want to hear is that, you've got kids in your wrestling room that have skin infections. If you do have kids in your wrestling room with skin infections, they cannot practice. It is just not fair to the other wrestlers to allow them to practice with a skin infection. Don't be naive and think, well, that's not going to affect anybody else, or we can put some tape over that, or we can cover it up with a bandage. Tape comes off, bandages come off. Skin touches the mat and it immediately infects the mat, and every kid that wrestles in that area will get infected with that same skin infection. So you need to take that very, very seriously. Anybody that's got any kind of skin infection, they need to sit out until that's completely gone and just take care of their body and their skin and watch out for all the wrestlers. There has been cases where states have shut down the entire wrestling season due to outbreaks of skin infections. And so we never wanted to get to that point. We want to make sure that we manage that very proactively. The next question is, who are your coaches going to be? You need more than one coach. It's a big mistake to think that one head coach is going to be able to handle the practice and the competitions every week. And I see a lot of programs that do this. They've got one guy. Not only is he the head coach, he's the guy that started the program. His kid's one of the wrestlers, and they want to go to competitions. Well, if you grow your club to any size at all, 20, 30, 50 kids, and then you want to go to an event that weekend, they're going to have 4, 5, 6, 10 mats. And how are you as the single coach going to be able to coach all those kids on all those mats? Because you're going to have multiple kids wrestling at the same time. And it's just unfair to send a kid out there to compete with no coach in the corner. And it's unfair at that time to ask the dad to then go and sit in the corner, having sat in the stands. What I would encourage you to do is to have a head coach if that's what you want to do. You can also do coach by committee, have multiple head coaches or multiple coaches. But you definitely need a coach, you need some assistant coaches, and you need dad coaches. I would say you need a coach, be it a dad, assistant, or head coach, for every 3 to 5 wrestlers you have. So if you've got 35 kids in your program, you really need 7 to 10 coaches. The reason being is when you go to events, you never know what your mix is going to be. And if you've got 7 coaches and they have 6 mats, you can assign one coach to every mat. And if nothing else, every kid on your team will have a coach in his corner. May not be the coach that he's most familiar with, but, we do our best at making sure that happens, but we at least have a coach on every single mat. So I strongly encourage you to make sure that you have multiple coaches. Multiple coaches aren't just going to jump out of the woodwork. Dad coaches aren't going to just jump in and volunteer. They're going to sit on the sidelines until you pretty much go over there and pull them out on the mat. Get them out there in their socks if you have to, and get them to start helping. Now, dad coaches can be very helpful. You got to give them a little guidance and tell them, no talking when the coach is talking. Only help us with what we're working on. Don't go off to the corner and start your own practice. But they're really good, especially with the little kids, getting the kids set up, getting the kids ready, keeping the kids quiet, keeping the kids focused. So I would strongly encourage lots of coaches, one for every 3 to 5 kids that you have. The next question is, who's going to run your club? And it's not always the coach. And now more and more, it's not the coach. The coach is coach on the mats and coach on the weekends, and a club director or a club president runs the club. Oftentimes, those clubs also have a board and multiple other volunteers involved. So, who's going to run your club? Who's going to create your documentation, your flyers, your sign-up sheets, your apparel forms? Who's going to put information on the website? Who's going to send the emails? Who's going to make the announcements? I can tell you about 90% of the time that is not the coach. So you need to identify, is that going to be you? Is that going to be somebody else? Who's going to run the club? And if you're, you're going to have somebody running the club, or you're going to have a board of directors. It's a very good idea in today's day and age, especially if you're dealing with money, to have a board of directors, to have a president, a vice president, maybe two vice presidents, a treasurer, and a secretary. If you have a president, two vice presidents, a treasurer, and secretary, that's a 5-member board. That's an odd number, so there won't be any stalemates. You won't have any deadlocks. And that's a good mix of people to have involved, and you can rotate that every year. Somebody can be a treasurer this year, and they can be the president next year, or they can rotate off. And it's also helping train them to be part of the high school booster club in the future, because that's usually how the booster clubs are run as well. They usually have a board and have volunteer positions for each one of their areas of need. Another question, will your finances be part of the school? Will it be part of an all-sports booster club for the school or for the rec department? What I mean by that is, when you're starting your club, will the kids be writing their checks and making their payments to join your club to the school? And will the school be funding your program, and will they be supporting everything that you're doing? That's great. Some programs are run that way. Some programs aren't. If your program is run such that the school pays for everything or most everything, but you have a need for fundraising, also make sure that the fundraising that you do is not also covered by the school and going back to a general fund. Because if you're out there raising those funds, my personal opinion is, if my kids raise the funds, those funds should be spent on my kids. I don't like the scenarios where you go out and you raise funds and it goes into a general fund, and it gets spent by all the clubs. The reason being that football has 200 kids, you have 40 kids, baseball has 150 kids, soccer has 100 kids. Everybody throws their money in together. How does it get divvied up? Usually by head count, right? By how many kids are involved. So you're going to get a much smaller percentage of the funds dedicated back to you. Now, if everybody was working equally, that may or may not be an issue. But what I have found oftentimes is that the wrestling parents are a little more focused and dedicated crowd. They do make the effort to do the fundraising, and then those funds get thrown into this bigger bucket, and then very little comes back to the wrestling club. So if you can, you want to have any funds that you raise stay with your program, and stay in your program. And hopefully you're not put in a situation, as I have heard, where they come to the wrestling program and tell them that every one of their wrestlers needs to raise $250 each during the wrestling season because they're building a new football stadium. I am dead against that. I don't think wrestling should pay for football. I don't think football should pay for wrestling. I don't go to the head football coach and ask him for money to buy singlets when my kids need new singlets. We go out and raise those funds ourselves, or the kids buy them. The parents pay for them, and we handle that ourselves. So I just think that fundraising definitely needs to be done. Some programs more fundraising than others, but when those funds are raised, I like them to stay with the program that raised them. Another good question is, will your club be a 501c3 nonprofit charity? If you are a 501c3 nonprofit charity, then you'll be allowed to accept tax-deductible donations. So when you have a company that is at the end of the year looking at a tax burden, and they're looking at ways to do tax-deductible donations to reduce their tax burden, you're able to take advantage of that. And those can be some pretty significant donations. So being a 501c3 is really good for that, as well as you don't pay taxes on your own purchases. So when you're spending $4,000 or $5,000 on apparel, paying 10% in taxes or 5% in taxes, being a 501c3 nonprofit will save you $200, $300, $400, $500 on those purchases. So it's definitely worth looking into. If you're part of a program with the school, it's probably going to be pretty easy to go ahead and file for that. If you are a paid club, you have a paid coach, and you are running out of the school, or if you're running out of a paid facility, it's going to be a little bit harder to become a 501c3 because you need to be able to prove that you're not a profit-bearing company. And if the coach is getting paid and if there's money going back to the company, then that's not the definition of a nonprofit. So if you're a part of a school program, getting a 501c3 should not be that hard. You can just go to the Google or your favorite search engine and type in 501c3, how to become a 501c3, and there'll be steps out there. There's some forms to fill out with the IRS, and it's really not that difficult to do. Now, moving on, next question is, who's going to design your flyers and your sign-up sheets? And are they going to be able to get sent home to the kids in the school folders? And will you be able to get those flyers to the local newspaper, to the school newspaper? How are you going to get those flyers distributed? My personal opinion is you have to do all of those things. I know a number of clubs that don't do a flyer. They just basically open the doors, and how many of your kids show up, and their attendance and their participation in their club is always very, very weak. If what do they say? A terrible thing happens if you don't advertise, and that's nothing. So you need to get out there. You need to kind of treat this club a little bit but like a business, and know that you need to go out there and get your information into the hands of the biggest group of people that you can. Using kind of a 10-10-10 principle. 10% of the people that you give a flyer to are going to be interested in what you have. 10% of those folks may actually come and get some more information, come to a practice, and then probably 10% of them are going to actually stick with it. So if you think about it, you give out 100 flyers, 10 people are going to be interested, one person's going to come to practice, and maybe nobody's going to stick. If you send out 1,000, 100 will come to practice, 10 will be serious, and maybe one will stick. So you've got to get your flyers and things out into every kid's hands. Now, if you're in a tight-knit community, not in a large metropolitan area, your take rate and your information rate is probably a lot higher. It's a lot easier to get that information out to your community because there's not as many organizations managing that. But you definitely need to get your flyers and your club information out into any and every kid of the age that you're targeting's hands. Takes us to the next question of, what are your club fees going to be? What are you going to charge? And then what are you going to include for that fee? I've thrown some numbers up here that are similar to what we've charged before in a club that I've been involved in. And if you're passing out a t-shirt, shorts, and a singlet, there's a cost for that. It's $90. Do you make that optional? And then your membership card, be it a USA card or a AAU card or some other association's card, is that included in the fee? And then what are you going to give back to the high school booster club? Are you going to set a certain amount into your registration fee that will go back to the booster club? I would strongly suggest it. We've had a great relationship with our high school program because we do set those funds aside, and at the end of the year we're able to give them $1,000, $1,500, $2,000. And the only requirement that we put on that is that money gets spent on things that the club kids, the club wrestlers, can take advantage of. We've bought an Adams takedown machine before. We've bought wall mats. We've helped pay for resurfacing of the Resolite mats. We bought exercise bikes. So really, we want those funds to go back to something that the club kids can take advantage of, and we've not had any issue or any challenge with that. And then a club fundraiser for the year-end banquet and the coaches' training. Do you build that in to your overall cost? At the end of the year, you're going to want to have a banquet. It's going to cost money for the trophies and awards. It's going to cost money for catering. Do you want to include that, or are you going to charge extra for that at the end of the year? And then also your coaches' training. One of the things that I don't like to do is I don't like to ask people to volunteer their time, become a coach, and then also pay fees. Basically asking a guy to come out 2-3 nights a week, dedicate 2 or 3 hours of their time 10, 15 hours a week, including working on the weekends, going to the tournaments. And then, oh, by the way, you've got to buy your coach's card. You've got to pay for your coach's training. And I personally just think it's the club's responsibility to help pay for the coaches and train them, get them a coach's shirt, and to take care of those coaches. And I think you'll find that your coaches will be a lot happier and last a lot longer if you take care of them in that way. So when you add all this up, we get a total of about $175. And the question really is that too high? Well, it depends on your market, depends on your school, depends on your area. The club that we participate with is in a middle class, maybe a middle, slightly upper class area. When I got involved, I did a lot of marketing. I sent flyers out everywhere. I think I sent out 3,000 flyers the very first year I was involved. Kind of the youthful exuberance or the uninformed exuberance. I just went and told everybody just whatever I needed to do. I went out and got that information in front of those kids. I know other people have done a great job using the local newspaper and getting an ad put in the local newspaper for free repeatedly. I know people that have made really good relationships with the football coach and the training that wrestling does for football, and having that coach talk highly about wrestling and even getting involved and helping coach. Is that $175 too high? Well, that's going to be really up to your market. There's going to be some areas, especially economically depressed areas, that $25 is too high. Don't even think about $175. $25 is too high. And that's, a situation that you're going to have to deal with. In that scenario, I would say that you're going to have to do a lot of fundraising. You're going to have to look for some outside donations to really get that program to go. But I would also encourage you to raise as much funding as you can. It takes money to run these clubs and programs. It takes money to do them right. If you do everything on a shoestring budget, if you do everything yourself, you're only going to be so big no matter what you do, no matter how good a job you're doing. If you can't leverage some other volunteers and some other people's effort, your club's never going to get very big. So you need that funding. If you're kind of in the middle somewhere, not quite the $175 level, then maybe you charge $65 and you don't include the apparel. Maybe you charge $30 and you don't include the USA card or the apparel or the banquet. That's really going to be up to you. My personal opinion is, if you make it too cheap, people devalue it, because people value things that they paid for, and that's what they see a value in. They don't see a value in things that are free or things that are cheap. So, keep in mind, you want to make sure that you have enough money to operate, and that you're able to do the things that you want to make it a great program. But you also don't want to price yourself out of the market. So, take that into consideration as you're deciding what the fees are going to be. When you start doing your practices, it is an absolute necessity for all of your practices, camps, clinics, competitions, dual meets, scrimmages, all of them need to have insurance. And not just liability insurance on the facility, but also insurance on the wrestlers. At least liability, if not also secondary medical coverage. And let me explain that a little bit. Oftentimes, and I would say the vast majority of the time, when I talk to a high school coach that doesn't have a youth program about starting a youth program, starting a youth wrestling club, I ask them, well, how are you going to insure the wrestlers? And they said, oh, that's covered by the school. Well, that's not. 9 times out of 10, the high school wrestlers are covered by the school because it is a high school sport. And they're covered for travel. They're covered on the bus to and from. They're covered in practice. The youth club, being also run out of the high school, is not part of the high school. They're not part of the high school team, and therefore they're considered an after-school program. And after-school programs are not covered by the school. No different than having a Girl Scout meeting or having a band meeting that's non-affiliated with the school, 4-H meeting or any of the others. The school is covered for liability for their facility, so if you slip and fall in the facility, there's insurance. But if a kid gets hurt in practice, there's absolutely no insurance. And what that means is that a kid gets hurt, goes to the doctor, finds out that it's serious. He's going to be in the hospital 5 or 6 weeks. The hospital bill is going to be $60,000, and the parents freak out. not being able to pay $60,000 out of pocket, or their insurance not covering it out of pocket, and they've got to find some way to cover those fees. So it's not even necessarily a malice or malicious event from the parent. It's a necessity. If the parent gets hit with a really big bill, somebody's got to pay it, and that somebody's going to be somebody in your club, because they're going to come back with a lawyer, and they're going to sue the coaches, they're going to sue the volunteers, they're going to sue the school, they're going to sue your board of directors, they're going to sue everybody. So you definitely need to make sure that you have insurance. I know a lot of people complain about buying membership cards to USA or to AAU or to other organizations, and those are absolutely required. Every wrestler you have has to have a card. Every coach you have has to have a card. Every volunteer you have, every parent that steps on the mat needs to have a card. That just reduces your liability. Does it remove it completely? No, because even having those cards doesn't mean that somebody can't go out and sue you anyways. But having that insurance, helps in that way, especially if you have the secondary medical insurance. Because think about the scenario I just explained. Why would the parents sue? Well, the parents would sue if they didn't have medical coverage that covered the event, and they were going to have this large out-of-pocket expense. I'm not sure that people that are involved with wrestling would sue just because their kid got hurt, unless the coach was doing something that deliberately put that kid in harm's way. And then if you do that, then you've got some liability on the coach's part. But most parents, especially wrestling parents, are pretty honest, and they're not really out there looking to chase an ambulance and sue just because their kid got hurt. I'll give you a prime example. My kids have never been hurt during wrestling practice. But my son's been hurt a couple times before practice. One time he fell, was chasing some kids around on the mat before practice. They all fell down. My son's head hit another kid's head, and my son ended up getting stitches in his face. And everybody was really, really worried that I was going to come back and sue, mainly because it was a very visual injury. I don't know if you've ever seen somebody that's gotten a cut over their eye or cut on their lip or on their cheek. Your facial cuts bleed a lot, so it really looked a lot worse than it was. My son just bit his lip, and it bled a lot. He had to get stitches. He bit all the way through the side of his cheek, and he ended up getting, 8 or 10 stitches on the inside and 8 or 10 stitches on the outside. And that was covered by our medical insurance. So, we don't care. It wasn't anything malicious. Nobody went out and tried to hurt my son. He just happened to get hurt in practice, and that's just the way it is. So I can't stress enough, though, the insurance. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but I want to definitely drill home the idea that if you don't have the insurance, if you're naive, and you say, oh, the school is taking care of us. When you're sitting in that courtroom and you just lost your house and you're trying to get this lawsuit to go away, you're going to be thinking to yourself, man, I should have followed his advice and made sure that the school was covering it, because I will be willing to bet you 9 times out of 10 the school is not covering it, and to make sure that you have that insurance. Let's move on. Practice schedules and kids' ages. If you're running a wrestling club for middle schools, are you opening it up to elementary school wrestlers? Are you running a combined practice? Are you offering high school practice? If you're offering high school wrestlers an opportunity to practice during the high school season, you should check with the high school coach and check with the high school athletic association or the state athletic association, and find out if there's any specific rules against high schoolers practicing and or competing outside of their high school practice, because there are some. And last thing you want to do is take a high school wrestler, try to make them better in wrestling by letting them practice with your club, and finding out that you've now caused that kid to get penalized somehow on his high school team. So definitely look into that if you're going to include high school wrestlers. For the middle school and elementary school wrestlers, if you're a middle school program, that's great. If you're a club program with both middle school and elementary, that's great. How are you going to run those practices? You traditionally have your experienced kids and your less experienced kids in what I call the little kids, which is your elementary school kids, and then you have that same group, experienced and non-experienced, in your big kids, which is your middle school wrestlers. I've not been successful putting all 4 of those groups together into one practice and running that as just one set practice. And the reason being is that a 6 or 7 year old experienced kid may still have less patience and focus than an eighth grade inexperienced kid, and all varying degrees in between there as well. You may have 10-year-old inexperienced kids and 12-year-old inexperienced kids, and they're just not going to be moving at the same pace your experienced kids are. So what we've done in the past is we've had practice on a couple nights a week, usually a Tuesday, Thursday, or a Monday, Thursday, sometimes 3 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and we split the practices. We have the little kids come in the morning, have the little kids come in the first session, 6 to 7:30 p.m., and then we have the middle school big kids come in afterwards from 7:30 to 9 p.m., and practice. And in that 3-hour, 1.5 hour sessions, we're able to get everybody in. We're able to reuse the facility so that we're not outgrowing our facility. As well as within those practices, we're able to split up the experienced and the non-experienced wrestlers. And you can shuffle that around a little bit. If you've got a fifth grader that is just a little monster, and he's going around just beating up everybody in your little kid practice, maybe you want to talk to the middle school coach about bringing him up to the middle school practice so that he can get kids that are more on his level. And unshamefully, the same thing can happen on the middle school side. If you've got a sixth grader that's never been in a sport before, is trying wrestling for the first time, talk to that parent, talk to that wrestler about moving down to wrestle with the fourth and fifth graders, because I think they would have a lot better experience. They would learn more from those younger kids, and they wouldn't be getting beat up as much by the seventh and eighth grade experienced wrestlers as they would if they stayed in that practice. So you can shuffle those kids around a little bit. Certainly be respectful of the coaches and talk with those coaches before you make any of those decisions, and don't just start dropping kids into different places and making the coaches deal with it. They definitely need to have a say. There may be some issues that you're not aware of that may complicate the situation, so you definitely want to review that with them. And then, will you have a systematic practice plan? Meaning that the practice is run the same way every practice, day in, day out. Kid can miss 2 practices and come back, and he already knows what the practice plan is, what the practice strategy is. Versus what I see often is kind of the coach of the day. When you have one head coach, that's what I see a lot of time. The coach just comes in and teaches whatever he wants to teach that day. If he's a long-time coach that's been running these kinds of practices for a long time, maybe he's got in his head this systematic approach, but often not. More often than not, we have coaches that just come in and it's just whatever they thought of that day. They watched a video earlier in the day, or they thought of something on the drive over, and they spend the whole practice working on this one move or this new thing. I would strongly suggest that you consider a practice plan that is very structured, and that any coach could fill in and run. And it's also training your volunteer coaches and your assistant coaches to take over when these other coaches move on. Oftentimes what happens is you'll get a lot of volunteer coaches when their kids are in 5th and 6th grade, and then they move on to 7th, and then on to 8th, and then they move on to high school. And interesting enough, those coaches don't come back and continue to coach once their kid is in high school. And nothing bad about that. It's just that their focus is now in high school, and there's a lot of activities in high school at the same times as there are for wrestling that really stretch that person, stretch that coach, and their ability to participate gets diminished. So you really need to build this program where you're bringing in these dad coaches and mom coaches as volunteers, and they see the practice plan, they learn the practice plan, you do it the same way every day, and then they can move up through the ranks. And when I say the same way every day, I'm not talking about where we just go in and do double legs every single day, and that's all we ever do is double legs. We do double legs every day. I mean, that would make for a very boring practice, and you wouldn't keep your kids around very long because they wouldn't be successful, and that wouldn't be good at all. What I am talking about is running a specific time for each event during the practice. So, the first 5 to 7 minutes, the kids jog or run or play a warm-up game. And the next, 5 to 7 minutes, they're stretching. Then the next 10 to 15 minutes, you're doing a drill technique, reviewing the technique from the last practice. Then you're teaching and drilling the new technique. And then you're maybe doing some live wrestling. I like to hold the live wrestling off till the latter in the season. The beginning of the season, you have a lot of new kids, and doing the live wrestling, when kids don't really know what they're doing yet, can oftentimes set a kid up to want to quit. So I like doing the live wrestling after these kids have gotten, half a dozen to a dozen practices under their belt, and then we can do a little bit of live wrestling, situation wrestling. And then you warm them down with running, jogging, or some additional games. And if you do that same plan every day, that hour and a half is broken up into each one of these segments. The parents learn exactly what the program looks like. The kids learn what the program looks like. It's very systematic. It's very duplicatable, and it's a great training tool for your future coaches. So I would strongly suggest, if you don't like the layout that I've described, certainly change anything and everything about it. Do your own thing. If you've got your own program that you've been doing for 20 years and you know how to do it, then that's great. Do it that way. I just wanted to lay this out and give you some suggestions that you could use to develop a systematic practice plan. The next thing is, will your club be offering strength and conditioning before, after, or during practice? Probably not after. And will your middle schoolers have the opportunity to lift or do strength training during the little kids practice? That's a trick. You bring the middle school kids in from 6:30 to 7:15. You have them do a little weightlifting, a little strength and conditioning training, and then they come in and they run practice from 7:30 to 9 o'clock. You can do that if your school's got those facilities and you have a coach that's willing to come in and do that, or if you have a dad that's willing to come in and run that. What I would say, though, is if you have a dad or a volunteer run your strength and conditioning program, I would say limit it probably to the middle schoolers, because that's the age that they need to be lifting. Unless you have somebody that's experienced and knows how to work with little kids with body weight lifting and helping them that way. You really, the little kids, before the kid gets 11 or 12 years old, you really don't want to be putting any heavy weight over your head. You really want to be very careful with the joints and make sure that you're not pulling any muscles or injuring the kids in any way. So if you're going to have a volunteer run your wrestling weightlifting and strength and conditioning program, make sure that they're definitely got a coach's card. Make sure that they have some experience and that there's some waivers that the kids sign, so that we've got less exposure if somebody gets a weight dropped on their foot, or if somebody pulls a muscle, or gets injured in some way. So definitely make sure that you have some waivers if you're going to do weight training or strength and conditioning training. So moving on, when are you going to do sign-ups? What time of the year? I think the best time is in the September timeframe, early September, before football ends and before basketball begins. You're competing against basketball for athletes and gym space, so you definitely want to get out there. In my area, the basketball starts promoting heavily the end of September, beginning of October, so I want to get my flyers out there at the beginning of September to make sure that we've let as many of the wrestling people know, the athletes know that we're offering wrestling during this season. A lot of kids that do football, if you don't go out there and proactively reach out to them, they'll end up just doing basketball by default, or maybe they'll get involved in soccer, or maybe they'll just sit at home and do nothing. So you definitely need to start marketing your signups and doing that early enough in the season. Are you going to have online registration? Are you going to have walk-up registration, or are you just going to wait and have registration the first day of practice? My personal opinion, I think you should do online registration, even if you don't require a payment at that time. Have a form on your website that they go in and fill out and include their date of birth, their weight, their age, their grade. And as those people are signing up, that'll allow your coaches and yourself to look at who you have signing up, and how your practices might end up being, and how many kids you have. Do you need to be doing more flyers because you don't have enough kids? Do you need to start cutting back on doing the flyers because you're getting too many kids? Having them do online registration gives you a good idea of where you're at and who you have. Walk-up registration is good, and I would strongly suggest you doing what I like to call high touch and high tech. The online registration is the high tech piece, and then the walk-up registration is the high touch piece. It's Sunday afternoon. In September, you have a date for, from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. We're going to be in front of the high school. The parents, you'll set up a table. The parents can pull up, jump out of their car, get the information, sign up for wrestling, jump back in the car, and away they go. That works out really well, especially if you get that advertised a lot before it happens. And I would suggest doing one kind of early, maybe early September, and then doing maybe another walk-up registration, in the October time frame. And then also offer the registration at the first day of practice, but you don't really want to be doing registration your first day of practice, and here's why. Even if you have a bunch of volunteers, you're going to have all these kids coming in for their first practice, and there's going to be all these kids coming in that want to sign up. And if they haven't already signed up, you've got to go through that paperwork, and they're missing parts of the first practice, and you're trying to talk to the parents, and it's just a lot of confusion and unnecessary confusion. If you can get 75-80% of the wrestlers signed up before the first practice, and you only have to deal with 20-25% of the wrestlers at the first practice, that's going to make it a lot easier. And I wouldn't do the sign-ups in the wrestling room. Or in the wrestling gym. Wherever wrestling is going to be, do the sign-ups for wrestling outside of that room. Out in the hallway, out in another room, in a classroom down the hall, whatever. But get those parents away from those kids so that when the coach is talking, he doesn't have to talk so loud to overcome the parents talking and your volunteers talking. So if you can get those guys moved out of the way, that would be very, very useful. We talked a little bit about fundraising and where the funds are going to go. I strongly suggest that you do fundraising. You're going to need those funds. It's going to take the burden, a little bit of the burden off of the cost for your program, and provide you the ability to do some of the special awards, allow you to pay for some of the entry fees for middle school duels, or entry fees for some of the open tournaments. I've been part of car washes, frozen pizza cookie sales, wrapping paper, bed sheets, frozen steaks and meats. The Patrons Walk is interesting. Basically, your club goes out into the wrestling community, the community that is in your school district, and they basically just walk and go door to door wearing their wrestling t-shirt and sweats, sweat hoodie and sweats. And they ask the wrestling community to contribute to the wrestling program. The vast majority of the people will give you some change, or $1 or $5 or $10, and in doing that, you can raise $1,000, $1,500, and you really don't have a lot of cost involved. So the Patrons Walk is a good thing to do. I've seen people do club calendars where they take various pictures of the club, and then they sell the calendar months to area businesses. Area businesses pay $100, $150, $200 per ad. And at the end of the day, the club ends up with about $1,800, and they have a $500 or $600 cost associated with that. So they end up making $1,000 to $1,200. And then my favorite is easy and simple. Give me $25, and I won't ask you for any more donations this year. I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but it works. It's easy to administer. And if you live up to your promise that you're not going to do another fundraiser and you're not going to ask them for any more money, you'll get a high participation rate. So consider that fundraiser as well. Just give me $25, parents, and I won't come back this year, and we won't do the cookie sale, and we won't do wrapping paper, and I won't come back and ask you for any more money this year. Will you hold a parents' night, an introduction night? To have the parents come and teach them about wrestling and what they should expect. A lot of your parents, 60% I would guess, every year are going to be new. And, parents will learn from the other parents, but it's better to actually bring those parents in, maybe do it on a Wednesday night, maybe the first Wednesday night that you start holding practice, or the second Wednesday night. And you basically teach the parents what wrestling is, what some of the wrestling moves are, how to watch a match, how it's scored, what is expected of the parents. If you don't allow parents in the wrestling room, you need to specifically tell them that. You need to specifically tell them where they can go and wait. If you want the parents to be around in case of an emergency and you don't want them just dropping the kids off and leaving, then you need to tell them that as well. If fundraisers need to be paid for by a certain period of time, if registration needs to be paid for, if their kids are going to be doing middle school competitions and there's certain requirements for that, this is a great time to tell them, what you're expecting of them and what they should be able to expect. So I would encourage you to have a parents' night or an introduction night where you bring them around. Don't expect that they're going to know what's going on. I have a lot of people tell me They're in the wrestling room. They're around. They got our flyers. They know what's going on. They don't. I'll tell you, as a brand new parent, when I was a brand new parent, I wandered around wondering if wrestling ever said anything about anything. I never could find any information on the website. I could never find anybody who knew anything. If I asked 3 people in the wrestling room, I got 3 different answers. So I strongly suggest that you send out lots of emails, lots of information with emails, have a monthly newsletter, send out weekly emails. But also have a parents' night or an introduction night to make sure that you specifically went over, what your expectations are. If your expectations are, if you're part of this program, you're going to every competition that we're going to go to, then you need to tell those parents that their kid needs to be at every one of those competitions, and that's expected of them. And that, I think, will help set the expectation of the parents and help you quite a bit. Let's talk a little bit about clubs and coaches liability. Coaches today, especially in our society, are more likely than ever to be confronted with the threat of a lawsuit. We talked a little bit about it earlier in talking about keeping the insurance for the kids and making sure that we have insurance for the kids. But we also need to make sure that our coaches and our volunteers have background checks, have coaches cards, have went to the training, have certifications, and that we're building qualified coaches, and we're putting these kids in front of qualified coaches. Gone are the days of turning the lights on in the gym and having a dad down the street run a practice. There's just too much liability. There's too many expectations of parents that these background checks are going to be done, that you're going to have certifications within the coaches, and you just need to do it. We need to make sure that that's taken care of. You're getting your coaches cards through your associations, your national governing bodies, and you're making sure that there's insurance there. And don't walk around saying all the coaches stuff is taken care of by the school, because again, just like with the wrestler, the school covers the high school coaches for high school events. They don't cover the high school coaches for youth events. They don't cover the lay coaches or the assistant coaches for youth events unless they specifically told you that they do. Make sure that you have that coverage. And make sure that you're watching out for those kids, because you only need one bad event, one mistake, to cause the whole wrestling community to pay the bill, to feel the pain. You get written up in the local newspaper, ex-dad coach slaps a kid in practice, and now there's a lawsuit. The people that produce news, I like to call it bad news, because I very rarely ever see any good news on the news, so I don't watch the news, to be honest with you. But they're looking for something that's sensational, something that's controversial, something that's going to draw in listeners and people to watch their news program. So they're going to sensationalize and build up anything and everything that happens. So one event, could have been an innocent event. Could be that the dad coach reached out to grab the kid to keep him from falling down the stairs, and inadvertently ends up leaving a bruise on the kid. And boom, next thing you know, you've got eye on the community out there with camera, and they're interviewing everybody in your club, and they make a big deal of it. So you really want to make sure that you're putting your club in your school and your program in the best possible light, and you're making sure that you've accounted for any of these negatives that could happen, and taking care of your coaches is one of them. And I said earlier, the coaches cards, the membership cards, the continuing education, the training, I personally believe that should come from the club. I don't like asking people to volunteer their time and also to give me your money. So, yes, I want you to give me 6 to 10 hours a week, and I want you to spend, $65 taking this coach's class. I want you to spend $35 on a coach's card. I want you to spend, $20 on a background check. And next thing you know, you got a guy who's willing to volunteer his time, and you're hitting him up with a $100 to $150 bill just for the pleasure of volunteering and giving you of his time. So I think you need to love on those coaches. I think you need to get them coaches shirts. I think you need to pay for their coaches membership. I think you need to pay for their coaches education. And where does that money come from? That money comes from that $25 fundraiser. And that's, you put that money in our program. 100 kids. Every 3 to 5 kids needs a coach. That's what I said before. So you're talking about 20, 25 coaches, dad coaches, and so forth. And getting shirts for all of those guys. The shirts are going to cost, $25, $30 a shirt. If you get them a t-shirt, maybe 10, $12, but I would suggest getting them a nice polo, with the club embroidered on it, maybe even their name on it. And their coaches' cards and all that stuff. You're going to spend some money. You're going to end up having 20 coaches, at a cost of $100 a piece. That's $2,000. So that $25 per kid doesn't go very far, but it is definitely needed. And I think you need to treat your coaches right and take care of them. And again, I'm strongly against the one head coach philosophy, because I just don't think, if you want to have a big club, if you want to have 4 or 5 kids, maybe one head coach will get you where you need to be. But you want to have a big club and a big program, then you're going to need multiple coaches. And you want to have a big club and a big program, because that's going to give your kids more wrestling partners. That's going to give you more kids to draw from once they're getting ready for high school. It's going to give you better community support. It's going to give you a bigger volunteer base. It is bigger is better in the wrestling club scenario, because of the ecosystem of wrestling, of a wrestling club. You need new parents coming in all the time to help fund and kind of replace the 8th grade kids that are moving up to 9th grade and they're leaving the program. So you need to be getting new people into your program at all times. And this is really a cutting weight question, and I didn't phrase it as a cutting weight question because I wouldn't approach a parent about cutting weight, especially a youth wrestler. But it is something that needs to be addressed. Whenever you ask a parent about cutting weight, they're going to tell you, my kid doesn't cut weight. We'll leave that for high school or what have you. But the reason I bring it up is oftentimes, especially new wrestlers, we'll see these kids come out for wrestling, and maybe they're the star running back, or maybe they're the star linebacker, and you see them out on the wrestling mat, and they're athletic, but they're just getting beat up at practice or at competitions by kids that are in better physical shape than they are. You need to talk with those kids and those parents, about where they need to be with their weight. If you've got a kid that is, 154 pounds and he's wrestling in the 160 pound bracket, but he could be wrestling in the 152 pound bracket, if he's got a 20% body fat, he's got 2 pounds to lose, and he could probably do it easily just by cutting back on the sodas, or cutting out the sodas, cutting back or cutting out the sweets, cutting out the fast food, eating healthier meals, working out harder. Those things can be done. I am not a fan of starvation. I am not a fan of not drinking water. Matter of fact, the opposite. If you want to cut weight, one of the best things you can do is drink 48 ounces to 64 ounces of water every single day, right up to the day, the night before your weigh-ins. And what will happen is you'll cause your body to start processing massive amounts of water. And then when you restrict water, that last 24 hours, your body's still going to be processing out water, expecting that you're going to be taking in water. And when you don't take in water, it processes out water, and you tend to process out a pound, 2, 3 pounds of water that you wouldn't otherwise. When you restrict your water intake and you restrict your food intake, your body goes into conservation mode. And it's going to conserve energy. It's going to shut things down. And that's why you're going to be tired at practice. That's why you're going to be grumpy. That's why you're going to have no power and energy to wrestle. So I am absolutely not a fan of not eating and not drinking. But I don't want a kid to go out and wrestle and not be competitive because his mom's packing him Twinkies every day. Let's be smart about it. Let's take some steps to take some of these things out. So I'm definitely a fan of going and having those conversations. And, you have those conversations one-on-one, not during wrestling practice. You definitely don't call anybody out. I am not a slender guy myself. I was a high school wrestler. I am in sales. I travel around a lot. I'm in hotel rooms. I'm on airplanes. And so I need to work on my weight. And so I'm as sensitive as anybody else is about cutting weight. And you definitely want to approach it appropriately. But I want to see a kid at his optimum success weight. And if he can cut a couple pounds and get into the lower weight class, and he's got, 10 times that to spare, he definitely needs to do that. When I say you got to have those conversations with those parents, I'm amazed at how many parents, when I suggest that if their kid would get down a pound or 2 pounds, that he'd probably be more successful in the lower weight class. I'm amazed at how many parents tell me they just don't know where their little Johnny would lose it from. And, from across the wrestling room, I can see that little Johnny looks like he's walking around with one of those baby floats around his waist or a Michelin tire around his waist. So, I'm kind of scratching my head thinking, man, if that was my kid, I just cut all the sweets out. I just say, all right, wrestling season, we're going to go to sugar-free pudding, sugar-free Jell-O. We're going to go to sugar-free Kool-Aid, no sodas, no cakes, no cupcakes. We're going to start eating lean. We're going to start cutting back on the carbs and the pasta. Not necessarily cut them out. I mean, you want to have a healthy diet, eating more fruits and vegetables, and not necessarily making a kid go on an all salad diet. I think that's why most kids hate diets, is because you put all salads in front of them. You can eat smart and eat healthy, and get to a competitive wrestling weight. Competitions and tournaments, are you going to have a club schedule of competitions? And these are the competitions we're going to go to as a club. And if you do, are those mandatory? Do all the kids have to come to all of the competitions? And I ask that because there's been situations in the past where we've had maybe an elite wrestler who comes to one practice a week, and the rest of the time they're going to a paid training center to train. And I'm not against that. I think that if you've got a wrestler who's exceeded the talent that's in your club room, they need to go find competition. They need to go find good practice partners. I don't believe going to an elite training center by itself is the whole answer. And the reason being that most of the kids going to an elite training center are practicing with other elite wrestlers. So the coaches that coach at those training centers very rarely focus on the fundamentals. They assume that everybody knows the fundamentals, and they work on the more elaborate, more advanced moves, more advanced technique, and that's great. The challenge is, what I've seen personally in my kids and in others, is that they have a tendency to forget the basics and to start to develop some bad habits of not staying in a good stance, not having good fundamentals. And so I like the balance between going to a paid training center a couple days a week, going to a club practice a couple days a week, and maybe doing some additional strength and conditioning training at a CrossFit or an Olympic lifting gym, and having a good mix. But as far as competitions are concerned, you're going to have those kids that come to nothing but your club practices. They're new, and do you make competitions mandatory? At the end of the year, when you're giving out your awards, do you want to be giving awards to kids that were part of your program the whole time, or do you want to be giving the awards to the kids that are part of your program part-time? You need to decide that. We had a scenario where we had a kid that was new, who wasn't a very good wrestler, but he came to every single practice. He did everything he was asked to do, worked hard every time, was never a problem, had some success, but not success that our elite wrestler had. Our elite wrestler came to one practice a week, went out there and dominated, did really well, was a state champion. At the end of the year, when you're looking at your most improved wrestler, who do you give that award to? And do you give that award to a kid that is not there at all your practices? Now, my personal opinion is, if the kid is in practices, be it your practice or an elite practice, I would count that as being in practice. If you have a kid that shows up one day a week and he sits home eating Cheetos and bonbons the rest of the week, I wouldn't consider that being part of the program, right? I would consider that being part of, a one day a week athletic training. So you really need to make those decisions, or else you're going to have some disgruntled parents at the end of the year. In that situation, the elite wrestler did win the most improved award. However, this other wrestler won an award for sportsmanship. So, while I think the kid that did the most, that physically improved the most, even though maybe his stats didn't show it, probably deserved the most improved wrestler. At least he did get award and did get recognized, so I was okay with that. But you definitely need to deal with that in advance. Be prepared to have those rules and policies, and either it's a rule or it's a guideline. If it's a rule, that's the way it is. There is no discussion. If it's a guideline, then there's some gray area, and there's some discussion on exactly how that gets implemented. You just need to decide where those are. Extra training and training at home. We've already talked a little bit about the training centers. I am definitely in favor of kids getting better any way they can, and if they need to go find a training center, then that's great. We do often lose some of the brand new wrestlers to paid training centers. They leave and go over to the paid training center and think they're going to go over there and train full time. Unfortunately, more often than not, they go over there, they go to a handful of practices, and then they end up quitting wrestling altogether. Because again, they're the beginner. They don't know their fundamentals. They go to an elite training center who's not focusing on fundamentals. They're focusing on, higher caliber moves and skills and capabilities. So the kid gets kind of put off to the side. Everybody he wrestles is so much better than they are. They get discouraged and they quit. So while I encourage my more experienced wrestlers to go and seek additional training, I also encourage my beginner wrestlers to give our club a chance, our program a chance, and learn the fundamentals first. Get some success on the mat in some competitions, and then if you want to go and get additional training, seek that out as well. And we support those programs and those schools as well. And then working at home. One of the greatest things I did for my personal kids is when they were 6, 7, 8 years old, I had them doing little routines at home every day before school, and little 12 by 12 exercises that they do 12 times in 12 minutes. So anybody can find 12 minutes to do something, 12 little exercises, 12 times in 12 minutes. And that is not, by the way, 12 by 12 is not something that I invented. I stole it from a school, I believe, Grand Valley State, I think is who I got that from. I can't remember right off the top of my head. But basically, it was little circuit training. When my kids were younger, obviously I wasn't going to give them a 45-pound Olympic lifting bar and tell them to go at it. So what we did is we took empty PVC pipe, the little plastic piping that you see at the home improvement store, and we just did our exercises with that. Bridge up on your head and do 12 bench presses. Stand up and touch your toes 12 times with the PVC pipe. Rotate left, rotate right, rotate to the left side back, rotate to the right side back. There's all kinds of exercises that you can do with just an empty PVC pipe. And then later on, you can actually put a little sand in that PVC pipe, make it weigh a couple, 2 or 3 pounds. Then you can get a bigger PVC pipe. And then you can graduate to a Wonder Bar, which is a piece of metal pipe with some sand or cement in it that's padded. Then you can move up the levels of the Wonder Bar, and then you can move into a regular weightlifting bar and move on from there. My youngest daughter won Kids Folk Style State, Kids Freestyle State, and Kids Greco State as a 6-year-old wrestling boys. And one of the big things that I contribute to her success is that every morning we did this 12 by 12 before they went to school, and all my kids did it together. And she was just stronger. She didn't look stronger. She looked just like a little girl out there wrestling, but her core strength, her flexibility was so much better than everybody else's. Plus, she was wrestling in a wrestling room and really getting trained, and she did really, really well. So I can't emphasize enough. Do more at home. If it's just doing sit-ups during commercials, when the kids are watching cartoons or doing push-ups during commercials, I think you should encourage your kids to do things and even have homework. I've passed out homework assignments that say this week we're going to be doing jump squats, and you need to do X number of jump squats every day. And this week we're doing push-ups. You need to be doing this many push-ups every single day. And I'll check and see if the kids are doing those. And if the kids all raise their hand, yeah, I'm doing it. I'll grab a kid that I know probably didn't do it, and I'll pull them out. And I'll grab a kid that I know probably did do it, and I'll pull them out, and I'll have both of them do the exercise real quickly in front of the team. And what will happen is the kid that you know is doing it will be able to knock him out. If it's do 20 push-ups, he'll knock out 20 push-ups real quick. And then the kid that's not doing it, that you know is not doing it, won't be able to do 20 push-ups, and your point will be made. Don't isolate the same kid every time. You want to bring out different kids. The idea is not to pick on a particular kid, but just to show the club the kids that are doing it and the kids that aren't, and doing extra every day is really important. And then lastly, we're going to talk just a little bit about this year-end banquet. We've done a year-end banquet every year. We've had participation awards where we've given out either a T-shirt to everybody or a trophy or a plaque. I think one year we did keychains. I'm not a big fan of participation awards. However, my club, we had a board of directors, and that's what they wanted to do, and I'm okay with that. I'm just not a big fan of giving kids awards for just showing up. I would much prefer that we give out sportsmanship awards and most improved wrestler awards, best wrestler awards. For the individual age divisions. If you have 5 age divisions and you have 4 awards, that's 20 awards. If you have a team of 40 kids, that's 50% of the kids getting an award. That's probably great. That's probably good enough. But that's up to you to decide if you want to do that. The banquet, you either have to fund it by collecting that money in the beginning of the year when you do your registration, which is the easiest, if your market will allow you to charge for that. And if you're not, if you're really strapped for cash and it's really tight, then at the end of the year, you're going to be asking those parents for, $5, $10, $12 per wrestler to be able to fund your banquet. And if they don't pay for their wrestler, then obviously they're not allowed to come to the banquet, and that's a harsh reality. But we need the funds to be able to put on the banquet, and that's the way we're going to have to do it, unless we get somebody to donate the money for the banquet, or we handle it through fundraising or something else. But that's what we've done in the past. We've had participation awards, we've had achievement awards. We've done some videos. Sometimes we get a parent that has taken a lot of pictures and videos, and they create a little DVD montage. That's kind of nice. Start the award ceremony off with a little 10 or 15-minute DVD montage. That really, the kids laugh. They point out, oh, that's me. Oh, that's you. And they really enjoy that. So if you have that capability within your club, you have a volunteer that'll do that. That's a great thing to do as well. So I'm going to end with that. I do appreciate your time, and look forward to speaking with you next time.